Hi, everybody. Okay, so the three kids just got to Hagrid's hut, and Hagrid's very upset because he found out that he wasn't going to be fired over the Hippogriff attacking Malfoy, but that he has to turn in the Hippogriff, and they're probably going to kill the Hippogriff for its attack on Malfoy. So that's what he's really upset about. So I'm continuing on page 218. There followed a list of the school governors. "Oh," said Ron, "but you said Buckbeak isn't a bad hippogriff, Hagrid. I bet he'll get off." "You don't know how them gargoyles at the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures," choked Hagrid, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. "They've got it in for interest in creatures." A sudden sound from the corner of Hagrid's cabin made Harry, Ron, and Hermione whip around. Buckbeak the Hippogriff was lying in the corner, chomping on something that was oozing blood all over the floor. "I couldn't leave him tied up out there in the snow," choked Hagrid, "all on his own, at Christmas." Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at one another. They had never seen eye to eye with Hagrid about what he called interesting creatures, and other people called terrifying monsters. On the other hand, there didn't seem to be any particular harm in Buckbeak. In fact, by Hagrid's usual standards, he was positively cute. "You'll have to put up a good strong defense, Hagrid," said Hermione, sitting down and laying a hand on Hagrid's massive forearm. "I'm sure you can prove Buckbeak is safe." "Won't make no difference," sobbed Hagrid. "Them disposal devils, they're all in Lucius Malfoy's pocket, scared of him. And if I lose the case, Buckbeak—" Hagrid drew his fingers swiftly across his throat, then gave a great wail and lurched forward, his face in his arms. "What about Dumbledore, Hagrid?" said Harry. "He's done more'n enough for me already," groaned Hagrid. "Got enough on his plate, what with keepin' them Dementors out of the castle and Sirius Black lurkin' around." Ron and Hermione looked quickly at Harry, as though expecting him to start berating Hagrid for not telling him the truth about Black. But Harry couldn't bring himself to do it, not now that he saw Hagrid so miserable and scared. "Listen, Hagrid," he said, "you can't give up. Hermione's right. You just need a good defense. You can call us as witnesses." "I'm sure I've read about a case of hippogriff baiting," said Hermione thoughtfully, "where the hippogriff got off. I'll look it up for you, Hagrid, and see exactly what happened." Hagrid howled still more loudly. Harry and Hermione looked at Ron to help. Shall they make a cup of tea?" said Ron. Harry stared at him. "It's what my mum does whenever someone's upset," Ron muttered, shrugging. At last, after many more assurances of help, with a steaming mug of tea in front of him, Hagrid blew his nose on a handkerchief the size of a tablecloth and said, "You're right. I can't afford to go to pieces. Gotta pull myself together." Fang the boarhound came timidly out from under the table and laid his head on Hagrid's knee. "I've not been meself lately," said Hagrid, stroking Fang with one hand and mopping his face with the other. "Worried about Buckbeak and no one liking me classes." "We do like them," lied Hermione at once. "Yeah, they're great," said Ron, crossing his fingers under the table. How are the flubberworms?" "Dead," said Hagrid gloomily. "Too much lettuce." "Oh, no," said Ron, his lip twitching. "And them Dementors make me feel ruddy terrible and all," said Hagrid with a sudden shudder. "Gotta walk past 'em every time I want a drink in the Three Broomsticks. It's like being back in Azkaban." He fell silent, gulping his tea. Harry, Ron, and Hermione watched him breathlessly. They had never heard Hagrid talk about his brief spell in Azkaban before. After a pause, Hermione said timidly, "Is it awful in there, Hagrid?" "You've no idea," said Hagrid quietly. "Never been anywhere like it. Thought I was goin' mad. Kept goin' over horrible stuff in me mind. The day I got expelled from Hogwarts, day me dad died, day I had to let Norbert go." His eyes filled with tears. Norbert was the baby dragon Hagrid had once won in a game of cards. "You can't really remember who you are after a while. And you can't see the point of living at all. I used to hope I'd just die in my sleep. When they let me out, it was like being born again. Everything came flooding back. It was the best feeling in the world. Mind, the Dementors weren't keen on letting me go." "But you were innocent," said Hermione. Hagrid snorted. "Think that matters to them? They don't care, long as they've got a couple of hundred humans stuck there with them so they can leech all the happiness out of them. They don't give a darn who's guilty and who's not." Hagrid went quiet for a moment, staring into his tea. Then he said quietly, "Thought of just letting Buckbeak go, trying to make him fly away, but how do you explain to a hippogriff it's got to go into hiding? And I'm scared of breaking the law." He looked up at them, tears leaking down his face again. "I don't ever want to go back to Azkaban." The trip to Hagrid's, though far from fun, had nevertheless had the effect Ron and Hermione had hoped. Though Harry had by no means forgotten about Black, he couldn't brood constantly on revenge if he wanted to help Hagrid win his case against the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. He, Ron, and Hermione went to the library the next day and returned to the empty common room laden with books that might help prepare a defense for Buckbeak. The three of them sat in front of the roaring fire, slowly turning the pages of dusty volumes about famous cases of marauding beasts, speaking occasionally when they ran across something relevant. "Here's something. There was a case in 1722, but the hippogriff was convicted. Ugh! Look what they did to it. That's disgusting." "This might help. Look! A manticore savaged someone in 1296, and they let the manticore off. Oh, no. That was only because everyone was too scared to go near it." Meanwhile, in the rest of the castle, the usual magnificent Christmas decorations had been put up, despite the fact that hardly any of the students remained to enjoy them. Thick streamers of holly and mistletoe were strung along the corridors, mysterious lights shone from inside every suit of armor, and the great hall was filled with its usual 12 Christmas trees, glittering with golden stars. A powerful and delicious smell of cooking pervaded the corridors, and by Christmas Eve it had grown so strong that even Scabbers poked his nose out of the shelter of Ron's pocket to sniff hopefully at the air. On Christmas morning, Harry was woken by Ron throwing his pillow at him. "Oi! Presents!" Harry reached for his glasses and put them on, squinting through the semi-darkness to the foot of his bed, where a small heap of parcels had appeared. Ron was already ripping the paper off his own presents. "Another sweater from Mum. Maroon. Again. See if you've got one." Harry had. Mrs. Weasley had sent him a scarlet sweater with the Gryffindor lion knitted on the front, also a dozen home-baked mince pies, some Christmas cake, and a box of nut brittle. As he moved all these things aside, he saw a long, thin package lying underneath. "What's that?" said Ron, looking over, a freshly unwrapped pair of maroon socks in his hand. "Dunno." Harry ripped the parcel open and gasped as a magnificent, gleaming broomstick rolled out onto his bedspread. Ron dropped his socks and jumped off his bed for a closer look. "I don't believe it," he said hoarsely. It was a firebolt, identical to the dream broom Harry had gone to see every day in Diagon Alley. Its handle glittered as he picked it up. He could feel it vibrating and let go. It hung in midair, unsupported, at exactly the right height for him to mount it. His eyes moved from the golden registration number at the top of the handle right down to the perfectly smooth, streamlined birch twigs that made up the tail. "Who sent it to you?" said Ron in a hushed voice. "Look and see if there's a card," said Harry. Ron ripped apart the firebolt's wrappings. "Nothing. Blimey, who'd spend that much money on you?" "Well," said Harry, feeling stunned, "I'm betting it wasn't the Dursleys." "I bet it was Dumbledore," said Ron, now walking around and around the firebolt, taking in every glorious inch. "He sent you the invisibility cloak anonymously." "That was my dad's, though," said Harry. "Dumbledore was just passing it on to me. He wouldn't spend hundreds of galleons on me. He can't go giving students stuff like this." "That's why he wouldn't say it was from him," said Ron, "in case some git like Malfoy said it was favoritism." "Hey, Harry!" Ron gave a great whoop of laughter. "Malfoy! Wait till he sees you on this! He'll be sick as a pig! This is an international standard broom, this is!" "I can't believe this," Harry muttered, running a hand along the firebolt, while Ron sank onto Harry's bed, laughing his head off at the thought of Malfoy. "Who—" "I know," said Ron, controlling himself. "I know who it could have been. Lupin." "What?" said Harry, now starting to laugh himself. "Lupin? Listen, if he had this much gold, he'd be able to buy himself some new robes." "Yeah, but he likes you," said Ron. "And he was away when your Nimbus got smashed, and he might have heard about it and decided to visit Diagon Alley and get this for you." "What do you mean he was away?" said Harry. "He was ill when I was playing in that match." "Well, he wasn't in the hospital wing," said Ron. "I was there cleaning out the bedpans on that detention from Snape, remember?" Harry frowned at Ron. "I can't see Lupin affording something like this." "What are you two laughing about?" Hermione had just come in wearing her dressing gown and carrying Crookshanks, who was looking very grumpy with a string of tinsel tied around his neck. "Don't bring him in here," said Ron, hurriedly snatching Scabbers from the depths of his bed and stowing him in his pajama pocket. But Hermione wasn't listening. She dropped Crookshanks onto Seamus's empty bed and stared open-mouthed at the firebolt. "Oh, Harry! Who sent you that?" "No idea," said Harry. "There wasn't a card or anything with it." To his great surprise, Hermione did not appear either excited or intrigued by the news. On the contrary, her face fell, and she bit her lip. "What's the matter with you?" said Ron. "I don't know," said Hermione slowly, "but it's a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, this is supposed to be quite a good broom, isn't it?" Ron sighed exasperatedly. "It's the best broom there is, Hermione," he said, "so it must have been really expensive." "Probably cost more than all the Slytherin's brooms put together," said Ron happily. "Well, who'd send Harry something as expensive as that, and not even tell him they'd sent it?" said Hermione. "Who cares?" said Ron impatiently. "Listen, Harry, can I have a go on it, can't I?" "I don't think anyone should ride that broom just yet," said Hermione surely. Harry and Ron looked at her. "What do you think Harry's going to do with it? Sweep the floor?" said Ron. But before Hermione could answer, Crookshanks sprang from Seamus's bed right at Ron's chest. "Get him out of here!" Ron bellowed as Crookshanks' claws ripped his pajamas and Scabbers attempted a wild escape over his shoulder. Ron seized Scabbers by the tail and aimed a misjudged kick at Crookshanks that hit the trunk at the end of Harry's bed, knocking it over and causing Ron to hop up and down, howling with pain. Crookshanks' fur suddenly stood on end. A shrill, tinny whistling was filling the room. The pocket sneakoscope had become dislodged from Uncle Vernon's old socks and was whirling and gleaming on the floor. "I forgot about that," Harry said, bending down and picking up the sneakoscope. "I never wear those socks if I can help it." The sneakoscope whirled and whistled in his palm. Crookshanks was hissing and spitting at it. "You'd better take that cat out of here, Hermione," said Ron furiously, sitting on Harry's bed, nursing his toe. "Can't you shut that thing up?" he added to Harry as Hermione strode out of the room, Crookshanks' yellow eyes still fixed maliciously on Ron. Harry stuffed the sneakoscope back inside the socks and threw it back into his trunk. All that could be heard now were Ron's stifled moans of pain and rage. Scabbers was huddled in Ron's hands. It had been a while since Harry had seen him out of Ron's pocket, and he was unpleasantly surprised to see that Scabbers, once so fat, was now very skinny. Patches of fur seemed to have fallen out, too. "He's not looking too good, is he?" Harry said. "It's stress," said Ron. "He'd be fine if that big stupid fur ball left him alone." But Harry, remembering what the woman at the magical menagerie had said about rats living only 3 years, couldn't help feeling that unless Scabbers had powers he had never revealed, he was reaching the end of his life. And despite Ron's frequent complaints that Scabbers was both boring and useless, he was sure Ron would be very miserable if Scabbers died. Christmas spirit was definitely thin on the ground in the Gryffindor common room that morning. Hermione had shut Crookshanks in her dormitory, but was furious with Ron for trying to kick him. Ron was still fuming about Crookshanks' fresh attempt to eat Scabbers. Harry gave up trying to make them talk to each other and devoted himself to examining the firebolt, which he had brought down to the common room with him. For some reason this seemed to annoy Hermione as well. She didn't say anything, but she kept looking darkly at the broom as though it, too, had been criticizing her cat. At lunchtime they went down to the great hall to find that the house tables had been moved against the walls again, and that a single table set for 12 stood in the middle of the room. Professors Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape, Sprout, and Flitwick were there, along with Filch, the caretaker, who had taken off his usual brown coat and was wearing a very old and rather moldy-looking tailcoat. There were only 3 other students, 2 extremely nervous-looking first-years, and a sullen-faced Slytherin fifth-year. "Merry Christmas," said Dumbledore, as Harry, Ron, and Hermione approached the table. "As there are so few of us, it seemed foolish to use the house tables. Sit down, sit down." Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat down side by side at the end of the table. "Crackers!" said Dumbledore enthusiastically, offering the end of a large silver noisemaker to Snape, who took it reluctantly and tugged. With a bang like a gunshot, the cracker flew apart to reveal a large pointed witch's hat, topped with a stuffed vulture. Harry, remembering the boggart, caught Ron's eye, and they both grinned. Snape's mouth thinned, and he pushed the hat toward Dumbledore, who swapped it for his wizard's hat at once. "Dig in," he advised the table, beaming around. As Harry was helping himself to roast potatoes, the doors of the great hall opened again. It was Professor Trelawney, gliding toward them as though on wheels. She had put on a green sequin dress in honor of the occasion, making her look more than ever like a glittering, oversized dragonfly. "Sybil, this is a pleasant surprise," said Dumbledore, standing up. "I have been crystal gazing, headmaster," said Professor Trelawney, in her mistiest, most far-away voice, "and to my astonishment I saw myself abandoning my solitary luncheon and coming to join you. Who am I to refuse the promptings of fate? I at once hastened from my tower, and I do beg you to forgive my lateness." Time's up, guys.